Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duvall, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who wishes that the Nintendo hit line was still open to call about this illusory forest,
Tim Longo. I wasn't sure when it was going to end.
When the break was. Sorry about that.
Good. No, it's very good. And yes, I do. Luckily, the internet exists. I will fully admit up front that I did look at one thing because I haven't been good at finding the keys. I'm not exhaustive with my searches, in each individual level. And to progress, which you have not quite done, you're literally like one level away.
Right.
To progress to the next to the boss of that section in the Forest of Illusion or whatever it's called, you have to find one of those keys,
and then you have to carry it around, which is one of those mechanics that is not super well established. I mean, they talk about it. They're like, you can pick up this red shell and run with it.
Yeah.
But they don't really explain terribly well that you can basically pick up anything that way.
Yeah, I feel like, it's true. I mean, are the rules, I guess they're consistent because you can pick up shells, you can pick up those buttons, you can pick up keys.
You can pick up the trampoline.
The trampoline, yeah, that's true. Okay, so I
mean,
feel like
you can pick up a lot of things. I just...
Yeah.
I feel like they kind of say it once. It's not... That's definitely a trend that has changed in game design over the years. I mean, now... it's 20 years later or whatever. Now it would be unthinkable to not tell somebody a million times about... I mean, even when we were designing and working on games together, on Starfighter, we put in very clear objective, an objective arrow and maybe even something on the screen that said what you were supposed to be doing. I don't remember exactly, but I feel like that trend has changed a lot, and certainly in a modern sort of 3D game like a Prey or whatever, they're gonna remind you, or they're gonna make the context sensitivity so clear that you can always press A when you do a thing, right? And so that's definitely a big difference here, is that I feel like they introduce concepts and do you remember them? If you don't remember them, they're gone.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because this theme comes up a lot. I think since we've been doing this podcast, and it's that, I think we always use Dark Souls as an example, but of that, what do you not say to the player to create that mystery of like exploration of mechanics and such, and more than just mechanics. And then, ironically, as a callback to our last episode where we were both in the same room, huzzah, super cool. We kind of had that same conversation about Zelda in that versus an Assassin's Creed where, to your point, they mark everything on your map, right, and kind of spoon feed it to you quite a bit, versus Zelda where it's much more player motivated and you have to discover stuff on your own much more so, it's interesting that Nintendo is still focused on that mentality when, to your point, maybe it's good. Maybe it's good that things have moved on, but maybe it's not, right? Because
I feel like the older games, the mechanics might be used a lot more sparsely. So something like having to pick up a thing and move it to the right place to use it is pretty rare in this game. Whereas in Breath of the Wild, all the mechanics, and I've played another 10 or 15 hours at this point, all of those mechanics are constantly coming up again, and you need them to do the sort of... They have sort of more traditional dungeons in these guardian creatures. They're called divine spirits. They're basically very similar to the Colossi in that they're levels made out of creatures, and I went and did one most of the way. I couldn't beat the boss, and I just left. But you can jump into Breath of the Wild anywhere and have to use things all of the time.
Right.
And it reinforces that. And I feel like Super Mario World really doesn't. There are things that come up, and if you remember them, there was a green mushroom that I could get to if I put a trampoline in the right place, and then I jumped up and activated the thing it was on top of, the power block it was on top of, and then went and jumped on the trampoline and went back and got it. And it was a lot of work, and I didn't bother because, as we'll get into, I've actually moved to emulation at this point because I was having such trouble with the Wii version, and I didn't need lives at that point. It was not beneficial to me, but it was very frustrating
Yeah.
to look at that and be like, there's a puzzle here, and oh, that's right, I can go back and get this thing and carry it forward and then use it when it's new position. But I had to remember that. I didn't,
Yeah.
and it's not a tool I reach for often. And so you tend to, it's one of those things that you buy, and then you use once every 15 years in your toolbox. But sure, it has a very specific purpose, but it's not used very often. You might even forget you have it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
but
is it true that the only, well, no, there was maybe one in the recent level. I feel like the only mandatory time that you have to pick something up to move it to successfully progress on the critical path is that ghost level that I got stuck at. Is
right.
that the only time? Because
Me
I
too,
mean,
yes. Yeah.
yeah, they have a hint that they tell you that you can do it, but they didn't.
It's pretty far away from when you actually need to use it.
Yeah, and then to your point, they don't require you to use it again since then, so far at least.
No,
Um,
it can be helpful, and I'm glad I have it
yeah,
in,
yeah.
in tool chest at
Well,
times. There is a spot where there are a couple of overturned shells, and the sort of indication is you need to pick up one of these to help you get through this next part. There's a level where, and I can't remember if it's at the very beginning of the section we played, but there's a level where there are lots of the blocks that you can jump and they start spinning. Let's call them spinny blocks.
mhm.
And then there's a level below where little turtles are constantly walking at you. Not ones with blue or red shells, but this kind of other more bulbous looking shell.
I think I know what you mean. Yeah.
Right. And there's an overturned red and blue shell that have no
Oh,
other apparent use.
yeah, yeah.
And you can go and pick them up and use them, at least one of them, to kind of run forward through things. And if you kind of run behind them, you can also kind of get through that more quickly. But I had a very hard time executing that particularly well. I was not good at that section. I found I'm not good at all at picking up a thing and running and doing the other buttons with it, just because of, I don't know, my thumbs. I have a hard time doing it. Even having a thumb on the, I guess it's the X button, or is it the Y button? It's the Y button. And then hitting B, which are the left and bottom buttons respectively for those who are using Xbox controllers in an emulator. It's frustrating as I'll get out to try to do that. I find the same problem with the cape.
Yeah. Oh, the cape is, yeah, I feel like, yeah, I'm just not good at it. I should spend more time trying to practice, but yeah, it's basically like I'm trying to mash all of them at once. I think on the 3DS maybe it's a little bit easier because maybe they're a little closer together or something. So it's basically my thumb is just kind of rolling around on all of them, trying to get them to do the swoopy cape thing, which is super awesome when it works. But I don't have the hang of it, I guess. Yeah, and yeah, the execution of that stuff. I feel like, we didn't play in succession to understand this, and neither of us are 2D Mario aficionados, but I can totally see, and I think we talked about this a little bit in the past, but I can totally see from the NES games, of which we talked about, there are 3 of them essentially, right? 1,
Yes.
2, and 3. And then you can see the progression of mechanical complexity that they would add for the NES or this SNES version
Right.
that we're playing now, where just adding Yoshi in as one concept, right? Who is this thing that you can get on and off of, and in fact, sometimes you need to do that if you're on him because you can't do certain things if you're riding him. He, just an example of depth, like layered depth that they added in. I think this is his first game, right? We already talked about that, Yoshi's first game. He wasn't in 3, I don't think.
I'll have to look that up because I'm not certain about that.
Yeah, yeah, I think we talked about it before. But anyway, point being is that you can see their urge, which I guess they did with Zelda and Metroid as well, to add in more layered mechanics because of the progression of the franchise. So for us jumping in, like there's actually a lot of depth there that maybe potentially somebody who'd played all of them would feel a natural complexity increase and it feel okay. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
like the fundamentals they already have down. And it's like, oh, okay, there's the fundamentals are still here, but then they added these 5 things, and so it adds a nice layer there for somebody who's migrating from NES to Super NES, which is a common thing for any franchise, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, whenever you're going to new hardware, you want to do something new and interesting with the hardware if you can. If there's something new and interesting to do with the hardware. I mean, one of the things that I'm a little worried about moving forward, at least in the sort of, more successful consoles this generation, is they're becoming PCs. And
hmm, there's
I
nothing
mean,
unique
they're
about them.
right, and there's not necessarily going to be a lot that's special about them, that's unique to them, that you couldn't get on a PC. Of course, they're now using lots of PC mechanisms to connect, so you can even take their controllers and go use them on a PC if you have Bluetooth, and it just,
Yeah,
they all feel like one thing. And what I guess maybe distinguishes them is exclusivity, if there is any,
that's
and
it.
or
Yeah,
yeah, and or if you buy into any of the meta stuff. So if your friends are there or you love trophies versus achievements versus Steam achievements, sure, that's there if you care about those sorts of things. Back back in these days, it was, oh, there's twice as many buttons,
yeah.
and a stick as well, right? I guess maybe not. I can't remember if the
Not on this.
there is not on this one. There
Yeah,
is one on my classic controller, so it's kind of hard to remember how it maps. But
yeah,
um, so you
yeah.
have obvious constant progression. You get eventually to the PlayStation 1 controller, which has however many buttons it has, and then you get the Rumble and you get the 2 sticks with the DualShock, and eventually you sort of get to these canonical controllers more or less that we use today, and they kind of stop. There's not been a lot of innovation in controllers other than in the Nintendo sphere. So I feel like Nintendo themselves are getting to a point of more standardization. If you take off the 2 sides of the Switch and you stick them in that holder for the thing, it feels like any other controller.
Hmm.
And I don't know. It's there's not a lot of big leaps forward from that standpoint.
Yeah, there's some convergence happening there. Yeah, and I think it's yeah, fair point on the hardware. I'm also speaking though, even on the software side, having worked on well, I mean, with both Tomb Raider and Halo, like working on the progression and talking about what needs to be added or should be added and kept the same or added in a new way to each successive sequel and how it evolves over time, right? And there's that weird conundrum of what do you keep and what do you not keep and what is sacred and all that sort of stuff. But then also wanting to have some sort of mechanical and systemic progression for fans who stick with it, right? Who have played every game
Sure.
and want to feel like there's some differences happening, and versus somebody who comes in fresh, who hasn't played the previous games, doesn't necessarily want that complexity right off the bat, right? Even though
Right.
there
Right.
should be a franchise progression in the design. And so this one's a little bit different, maybe because it was a launch. It was a launch for the new hardware, so you could say, well, that's a clean slate. But still, I guess with every level we play of this game, I just am constantly surprised at the depth that they're getting out of the combination of these simple concepts that gets pretty robust, and I'm not even scratching the surface, I feel like, with what I
Right.
could do in a given level where I could, like you said, take this thing, carry it over here, try this other thing. Or what if I come back here with the cape? Because I
Right.
almost never have the cape because I'm dying all the time.
Right.
And so I'm like, oh, okay, well, what if in this level, the cape would probably be a completely different level? So it's like that replayability and like, again, that like concept of I'm a kid who this is the one of the 5 games I will have for all year, or maybe 2 games, and
Or maybe five. Sure.
I'm gonna play the heck out of this game and go over every inch of it because it's what I have, so where here, I think these days we blow through stuff so much more quickly,
Yeah,
including,
that touches on a thing that you mentioned in pre-show, which is the sort of incentive to explore,
yeah.
and it is pretty hard to pick out why, other than being a completist, and even there, the game doesn't give you any info. It doesn't help you be a completist. There's there is information about the little circles that represent the levels. If they're yellow, there's only the one exit and entrance. If they're red, they have multiple exits. So that's the one bit of information you have. I don't know, since I haven't yet found all the exits to any particular level, whether they turn yellow after you found them all. I assume they do. Let's just speculate.
Maybe, yeah, that might be true.
So once you found all the ways out, maybe you have at that point more information. But there's not a lot of support, and there's
No,
not a lot of benefit, not a lot of apparent benefit.
well, that's why I brought that topic up. Is I had to give a specific example in the Force of Illusion, um, and as that, I forget who it was, the name of the guy that wrote
James
it.
Roberts, come on, man.
James. Okay, sorry. You you're much more intimate with the males than I am. James Roberts said about he and his dad, right, when they got to this in the old days, and his dad was so frustrated he had to call the hint line, et cetera, et cetera. And I know exactly where they are, where they had to do that. And so I went and found the key in the level that I thought I was supposed to progress. And so I found one of the kind of offshoot paths that brings me over to this other level that I didn't know about, basically a secret, quote unquote, secret level. Well, there's kind of two in a row. And then in a kind of taunting kind of way, on the same screen where that secret level is in the overland, you see the Koopa Castle below you, but that's not where you are. So you're like, wait, what? I thought I was going the right direction. I found this other secret thing. Okay, cool. And I had this moment because of your point about what is the incentive for exploring other than being a completionist. I had this moment where I was like, well, I'm not going to play this level. I'm going to go back and find the way to get to. Part of it is because we're playing on timer, right? So we're playing for the podcast. So I'm kind of forcing myself to finish. And then if I have time, maybe I'll go back. But I chose not to play that level, even though I found a secret level, which may have been the first one I've truthfully found, and go back to finish, and get to the boss and go the other direction because I found the wrong key basically, or I chose the wrong level to find the key in. But it's almost like, for me at least, it was discouraging exploration. And then the other point that I mentioned in pre-show that attaches to this is not only what is the incentive, but the weird combination of pretty high skill combined with exploration is breaking my brain too, and maybe another clue for me personally about why I've never really taken to this genre and this franchise is I really like exploring in games. But if in order for me to explore, I have to actually have a high skill, and I have to, die a lot and replay levels a lot to actually find the key to the secret thing or whatever. I think I just get frustrated about that, So it's a weird, and not a lot of exploration-based games have super high skill barriers to actually enable you to explore.
Right. I mean, a good counterexample for me is something like Metroid Prime, where I got almost all the missile packs, maybe not quite all, but very near to all of them. And that you want to do just because, of course, you want to have them for the final boss battle or what have you. Certainly when I played Metroid Prime 2, I didn't have enough of them, and I got to that final battle, I couldn't do it. I didn't have nearly enough missiles, and I was kind of, unfortunately, in a bad place. But so I never finished that one because I couldn't get past it. I went once I finished the sort of loop of the Force of Illusion and understood, okay, I'm now at that point where I'd be going in circles. I don't have any obvious places to look. I'm just going to go explore other levels. I went all the way back to the first one that has multiple exits, which I knew had another exit. I had seen that there are these little cloud things up at the top that you can land on if you have the cape, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't get from one to the other. I couldn't get up enough momentum to use the cape. I'm not very good with the cape. I have a hard time staying up elevated very long with the cape, other than when I can get lots of coins in that one area that I've told you about, I I had a very very hard time finding the other exit out of that level, even knowing there was one there.
Yeah. Yep.
So and it is the skill barrier. Now I found it a lot easier now that I switched to using an emulator because I'm convinced now that there's some lag somewhere in the Wii system as far as either it's introduced by my TV or it's introduced by the fact that I go through um, a tuner. So maybe my tuner introduces a bit of lag. Maybe there's a controller bit of lag. I have no idea what is causing the problem. But when I went back and just caught up to where we were, I easily caught up to where we were and surpassed it in less than an hour. So my skills have been developing.
Hmm.
But when I was playing on the Wii, I just couldn't. I could not move at that pace. Not anywhere near that pace. I would spend an hour on a level just getting to the midpoint, and on any given level. And here I breeze through like 10 levels in under an hour just to catch up. So there is a huge amount of skill. Unfortunately, I think I added to that skill problem. I felt this way a little bit with Super Metroid. Like there was a
Oh yeah.
certain of the jumping things I just could not
The
do
jumping off the wall
reliably.
stuff and yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I forget what that was called, but that sort of jumping and as you land, you jump again. As you land, you jump again, and you circle
Hmm.
back. I had a very, very hard time doing that on the Wii, and I suspect there's not enemies that I'm trying to avoid, so it's usually just you're jumping up and you're jumping up, and you can just kind of get good at that and
Brute,
accommodate the lag if there's lag.
brute force it kind of.
But here on Mario, I was not able to do that, and I'm finding myself very happy that I switched to emulation. And my personal barrier for emulation is I already own the game. I'm just going to play it in some other format. So that's where I draw my moral line. I paid for
Yeah.
this game. I just can't play it on the system that I have for some reason.
Yeah.
So I'm and I didn't sell it off. I still have it. It's sitting there in the Wii. But well, anyway, but yeah, I think that that very high level of skill, it's a mastery thing. I think that a lot of older console games really expected you to master their systems, and I feel like this, even in things like text adventures early on, became a thing. You had to master certain skill sets, certain ways of looking at the world. It's even to a degree true of adventure games, though you could mostly brute force your way through those things if you got stuck. I feel like mastery was a huge thing in the early days of games, in that first 15 or 20 years,
Hmm.
that we've gradually gotten away from, and I think in part because the audience, as we've talked about before, has gotten bigger.
Yeah. Well, and then you have the Demon Souls and such bringing it back, right? Or and cordoning off.
Even there, it feels like the loop is much tighter
Yeah.
between death and
Well, yeah, the
trying again.
usability of that punishment has become better, which is a good
Sure,
thing. Yeah, that's a
sure.
good evolution. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think the one thing to play devil's advocate with myself on the exploration thing, and I totally agree with what you're saying, but I guess if you have become, and I'm kind of thinking about some of the friends at work that I've been talking to, this like the guy I mentioned, Chris, who has played it so many times and is just got it in his his muscle memory. Um, if you are to the level where you really enjoy the game and it's just you have that muscle memory and you're having a lot of fun with it, you're the pure joy of, and what I mean, kind of going back to the incentive point about the incentivizing exploration, the joy of playing the game is also a good incentive. Do you know what I mean? Like, so that new level, the secret levels that you're finding, if you really love the game and you're good at it and you're having fun, then every level you find is a gift, even though you're not getting a new, missile power up or something. And I think that's why I've always loved the Metroid games and the Zelda games, is that exploration is rewarded with usually a mechanic or a power up of some kind that you keep, and you
Right.
feel this sense of empowerment. But I guess there's something to be said for just the joy of playing the game and finding this, like that secret level that I skipped just for time's sake. Um, I'm sure there's some cool stuff in there, that I should probably go back and play just to experience it for the fun of it. Um, but then the other point I was going to make, kind of shifting gears back to your point about like the mastery and the precision. The one thing I definitely do appreciate about the Mario games every time I do play one is the precision and the just meticulous. Like there is just something that they do with their games, and I think Mario is like the ultimate example of that you just rarely see. There's so many indie games that I think try to clone, and kind of do their versions of Nintendo type games. And other than maybe Super Meat Boy, that it feels like it's such a difficult thing that people underestimate how hard it is to make such a precise and pixel perfect and well tuned platformer. It's just impressive that they've been so consistent with it over the years.
Right. I mean, they certainly have, and I agree with you. There is joy in just getting better at a thing. I guess where it falls down for me is there's no help to point me in the right direction. One of the things we talked about
Trial and error.
pre-show was there's no star system, collectible star system that tells you
Yeah.
you found them all. You know that there's going to be this many per level, or
Proof that you have mastered.
exactly right.
Yeah.
There's no and there's no mapping, for example. So you can't know, oh, I found all the spaces like you can in to a degree in Super Metroid. You have a good sense of, oh, I found all the space in there. Sometimes you'll see a thing, you can't figure out how to get to it, but you at least know it's there.
Mm-hmm.
And later games certainly get better at that as well. Here, I just don't. It's not until later Mario games that I have a good sense of whether I've completed a thing and how to go about even finding it. If, you don't know if you've missed a pipe that you can go down, or if there's something up in the air that you can go find. It's very, very hard to find those secrets, and they don't even tell you that there are secrets necessarily. I mean, one of the things that happened in like Wolfenstein 3D was every level at the end, oh, you got 0 out of 3 secrets, or you get 2 out of 3 secrets, or
Right. Yeah. There's no.
and those things came later to say, oh, there were this many exits, but you only found one, the critical path one that we meant you to find.
Yeah.
And here there's none of that, and I feel like not too long after that, and even almost contemporaneous with that, those sorts of things were happening. So
yeah, and I to tack on that, I mean, I also meant joy in just finding another level to play. You know what I mean? Not even necessarily mastery, but like, oh, I explored and found this key that unlocks this thing, and oh, I'm rewarded. I'm just thinking of it kind of from like through a kid's lens. I'm good enough, and I enjoy playing the game over and over again enough to where if I find a new level, like it's almost like I've elongated my playtime.
Super Mario Galaxy does a good job of knowing that there's going to be one of those every level.
Yeah. No, it's fair. I mean, they've gotten way better at it now, for sure. And those are learnings that people, and I think that's the kind of the concept. We talked about this, I think, with Breath of the Wild too, of the weirdness of we put Nintendo on a pedestal so often on a pedestal, and there's this weird question, I think, that at least I'll speak for myself, but I think everyone really goes through it, where you have a hard time convincing yourself that they would be influenced by somebody else, because they're always the one that seem to be driving, the industry in a lot of ways. And so when you see something like, to your point, the usability of secret levels or the star system or something like that, they probably innovated some of that stuff, but like with Breath of the Wild specifically, I feel like I see influences from other games in that game very specifically.
Oh, everywhere. Absolutely. Sure.
And so it's just there's this a weird kind of.
I mean, I see Skyrim in it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. There's just almost a little bit of an uncomfortable feeling of like, oh yeah, that's right. They are human. They can be influenced by us, not me specifically, but by other games.
No, but by me is what you're saying.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Heavy influence. I think you're special thanks in the credits, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they actually have a picture of me in Nintendo headquarters in Japan. So.
on the wall.
Yes. It's probably a whole mural. That's just all of my career.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Anyway.
Yeah. So it's fun playing this game for sure. I'm glad we're doing it. I'm way out of my comfort zone. Thank goodness for save game state and all that stuff.
That was a very helpful addition in switching to emulation.
Yeah, I
It's
think it's going to save your
almost,
sanity,
almost.
especially if there was lag.
It's funny though. I've almost never needed it. There's only been a couple of times where I've leaned on it at all.
Yeah.
Mostly, I just kind of breeze through the levels.
Well, you've clearly picked up skill then. Then you that
I
you know, I mean,
have,
you've
I
found
have, but I feel
confidence.
like the timing has been so off.
Yeah.
It's been so weird. It's been so deflating to play it on the TV and have it be such a terrible experience that I switched to the PC. And I was like, oh, this is so nice. This is exactly how I expected it to feel. So yeah,
Yeah.
I
One thing
guess I you know what I so there is a sense I feel like if this had been my experience throughout the podcast so far, I would be enjoying finding more levels.
Yeah.
Because
you're breezing through.
right, because I'm at the point now where my skills actually are working in a way that they still don't on the Wii, but they are working very well on the PC and or on something that has no apparent frame lag, and I'm enjoying that. I really enjoy the feeling of mastery that I do get. It's something I also feel in the 3D versions of the games, and I wish I'd had that all the way along. And so now that's a lesson to me for future games that we play to at least try to figure out where the best experience is to be had, because it's in this case it clearly wasn't emulating on the Wii for whatever reason. I don't necessarily blame Nintendo, because again, it could be anything in the setup that I have here. It's impossible to know. So.
Well, the other thing I do find myself wanting to do, though I know I won't and don't have time to, is going back and replaying stuff using their overland system, which, as we talked about, you can kind of start a level and then exit at any time, which I didn't know about. But just taking Yoshi through every level, you know what I mean? Like, probably fundamentally changes a lot of your options, right? The cape as well, like the cape clearly is a game changer for many levels, because there's a lot of stuff up high that you can't even get to without it or whatever. And you just see the great replayability of that stuff. And the other thing that I actually looked up last night that I probably will still do, though it is $30, is I'm thinking I might get the Mario Brothers 3D / 2.5D game for 3DS, the one that was built for the game. I need to look it up, but I think it's the new Super Mario Brothers 2, which was the 3DS version.
There was a second new Super Mario Brothers, so that's probably.
I think that was the 3DS, because I think the DS is the Wii the new Super Mario Brothers 1? Yeah. Anyway, they're naming.
There was a new Super Mario Brothers for Wii.
Yeah, so I think
it looks like new Super Mario Brothers 2 is Nintendo 3DS exclusive.
Yeah.
So yes, it's,
seeing just
it is
taking
in fact the 5th best-selling Nintendo 3DS video game. So there you have it.
Well, I just to our point about some of and because that one is, I believe, 2.5D, right, versus say, going and playing, just to kind of equate a modern version of this kind of game. I'm interested in that kind of the way my experience with Link Between Worlds, and how good that game is. So I kind of wanted to check that out for the platform I'm playing on, to see that sort of the future of that game, and see what they do with it. So I still might do that. The $30 is a little bit rough, but I can do it.
You can probably.
I can afford it.
Okay. Why don't we take a quick break here?
Yeah.
And then come back. We'll do some reviews and stuff.
Sounds good.
Welcome back from the break. We're trying to catch up a little bit on our emails and reviews bit by bit. Everybody's been so kind and sending us lots of stuff, both to devgameclub@gmail.com and on Apple Podcasts. We'd love to hear that stuff. Tim, I have the first one for you.
Yes, from Ben Zog, if that is your real name, as Brett would say. Subject Mario. Ah, geez, you guys are making me write in corrections while listening to episode 74. I have a few notes. Thank you, because we didn't do our research
on... You're not lore people.
No, and yeah.
Especially not me.
He says, in Donkey Kong, Mario is actually Donkey Kong's owner. Donkey Kong escaped and kidnapped his then-girlfriend, Pauline. Mario is not a janitor, but a carpenter. Oh, it wasn't until Mario Brothers, where he was determined to be a plumber. Note, I said Mario Brothers and not Super Mario Brothers. Yes, good note. As for Odyssey and Mario being shorter, Odyssey and Mario being shorter than people, here's a fun theory about why that would be.
All right, this is the link, and I'll try to explain that in a minute.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that. Yeah. That also uses Mario and Donkey Kong backstory. Keep up the good work, Ben from Iowa. So, what is that video, briefly?
So, in the video, there's a lot of exploration of Donkey Kong and his intersection with Mario. And there's some suggestion that the bananas in Donkey Kong games might lead to gigantism because the minerals and stuff that are in bananas, like potassium and B6
and that's why the people are bigger?
And he does point out an interesting thing that I never noticed or remembered, which is that Pauline... which, wasn't the princess in Donkey Kong. But Pauline is actually much taller than Mario in that game as well.
Yeah.
Which I had forgotten. That is true, but that's definitely true.
I mean, yeah.
And the video goes into and shows lots of stuff about how they are basically twice the height. And there's a ton of... In New Donk City, which is the New York City analogy that's in Super Mario Odyssey.
Yeah.
So, in the videos we've seen, those there are tons of Donkey Kong references to different Donkey Kongs, characters in the Donkey Kong games, etc. So this theorist kind of tries to get into it. I'll put the link in the show notes. I didn't find it super compelling, I have to say, but it was funny. As far as the lore goes with the arcade cabinets, nobody reads anything that's written on arcade cabinets, for one thing.
Right.
For another thing, I don't think there was really any detail of that on those cabinets as far as the backstory goes, and it looks like nothing else other than either Mighty Joe Young or King Kong, right? Large ape, damsel in distress, hero. That's pretty much what you get from those games. Sure, there's barrels and stuff that he's throwing that aren't, and there's no airplanes circling him or anything like that, but it definitely read to me when I played it as King Kong. So,
and
regardless, whatever the backstory that has been backfilled and retconned into this thing, to me, King Kong.
Oh, man, and I mean, the Beastcast recently had somebody call in or write in about Donkey Kong continuity, and they went deep on that, so... like which Donkey Kong is Donkey Kong Jr., and then there's
and then the because original there's Cranky Kong,
which
might
is
be
apparently
the old version of Donkey Kong.
The original, so all the crazy stuff.
It's nuts.
Yeah, and then they also read a little bit of the manual from, I think, Super Mario Brothers, where they talk about how the Mushroom Kingdom was invaded by the Koopas, and they turned the mushroom people into blocks and bricks and stuff. And so they're kind of implying that, like, I don't know, it's just some crazy stuff. So anyway,
and this is something we should probably talk about at some point. We have this bizarre need as as people who play games to make all this stuff make sense in some way.
Yeah.
And I'm totally fine with it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
There is no continuity. I'm totally fine with these are unrelated games made from the same elements with similar characters and skills, but they don't have a continuity.
there is something liberating about that, and I do wish we talked about this with the Zelda canon, right? Because then we had that debate about they finally put everything in some sort of continuity when
Right, exactly.
Skyward Sword came out and all that stuff, and then kind of retconned it and how weird and kind of silly it is, and maybe even dumb, I'd say. The thing, I don't know. One quick thought as you said that it is a fun topic we should talk more about at some point, but I feel like maybe one difference, and movies do this a little bit, but they don't worry about it quite as much as we do. Other than say like the Marvel universe, which is trying to have this macro continuity.
Yeah,
But
kill me.
and I just watched John Wick 2 finally, and so they're also kind of have a weird world building going on there that I don't
Right,
know
but
is.
it's two movies.
No, it is, but there's going to be a third one, and my point with John Wick 2 is they're overdoing it now. The first one, it was
Already
mysterious.
on the second one.
Yeah, I think so. I think they kind of went too far. So, but for us, I feel like maybe one, and I'm kind of speaking from experience here a little bit in my own OCD, and as you know, being a lore nut. I feel like there's this compulsion that we have because we're building worlds in games, that are more obviously not Mario's not real, but they're more fully realized than a movie would be, right? In a movie, it's passive. You're watching it happen. You just assume they're going to tell you as much about the world as you need to know. But in a game, you're in a world, and as developers, we're building worlds. So then it's like, well, if we have a world, we got to think of all the rules of why this world is the way it is. And I don't know, maybe that's something.
I think there are movies where there are rules, and those rules come into play, and they tend to be things like horror movies, where
yeah,
how the horror works is part of the rules of the
I
world
just mean
building.
just enough, though. Like
Right, sure.
they try to.
But
stop.
but they're leveraging often our own understanding of the real world.
Yeah,
Almost
right.
always, right? It's very rare that they're starting from scratch with a whole physical universe, right? So I don't know. That's kind of a deep topic,
Yeah.
but I do feel like there are long-running series where they don't care about continuity. For example, James Bond, right, where there is
Mm-hmm.
a Casino Royale that has now happened twice.
Or
in
Final
the James
Fantasy.
Final Fantasy, right? That is a title-related series, right? There's no continuity really, although sometimes there are little batches of games that are related. X2, X and X2, and then there are several around Final Fantasy 13. There's some Final Fantasy 7 stuff, even with movies. I think at least one movie, Advent Children.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there are places where they try to make them connect together, but not in general. I don't know. It's interesting. It's weird.
Yeah.
I wonder about some series that I don't know much about. Like Wizardry is not a series that I've played a ton of, and I wonder, are those like related, or are they just thematically related?
Mm.
Ultima, they all seem to be related because you're always the avatar coming in from the
I think they
the
are.
other
Yeah.
world, from our world to go into Ultima.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird, but yeah, maybe. I mean, there might be something to that where because we have to build this whole thing and you are placed right in the middle of it and you need to figure out all the rules anyway, we try to make all this continuity. But when it comes to these franchises that are dozens of titles, I just
I
like
know.
who has time
I'm
to play all of them? I don't know.
I know when I go deep though, I love that about it. It's definitely a weakness of mine. And that's what I did with the Witcher series when, like I've said before, I wasn't going to play Witcher 3 even though I really wanted to before I played 1 and 2, and now I'm in deep. And I really like that I committed that time to it. But then it means I don't get to play everything because I'm focused on going deep on Metal Gear or Witcher or something.
Right. No, that's true. Metal Gear is probably one where I appreciate the world building and the lore more than I appreciate in other games. Partly because it's so nuts,
Yeah,
but
that's why I like it.
also
Yeah.
but also because thematically it feels like we're going to take this character and look at him at different points in his career, and I guess the clones from which he's descended or whatever. God, but
Oh,
but but
I'll
but thematically, oh, I know you could draw me a picture, but
go there.
thematically, it is interesting. Like this is young Snake, this is Big Boss, who was the originator, and then I don't know, whatever. It kind of jumps around a bit,
Hmm.
and that is a little bit more interesting. But I feel like with these games that are fairly abstract
Yeah,
in
it makes
terms
no
of their
sense for these.
relationship, right? The Mario games and even to a certain extent the Zelda games, I just don't. I don't care. I like the opinion of a former emailer who said Zelda is just Fireside Tales. Every
Yeah,
night somebody tells a different story of Zelda.
totally. Well, it's the
And I
Legend
love
of
it.
Zelda.
I love it.
That's what I love
Exactly.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let me take the second one. This is from CJ Zimmerman. He says, "Great job. Greetings. First of all, I wanted to let you know how much I appreciate how you're willing to make time for this podcast, even during the busiest parts of game development, which I wasn't expecting when I first discovered the show. Second, Peach did get her own game on the GBA, Super Princess Peach, in which she has the task of rescuing Mario, though that game has its own controversy as Peach's abilities are powered by her emotions, which raises the specter of the
Oh
emotional
boy.
woman stereotype. Though there is also the counter argument that Peach is not being controlled by her emotions, as the stereotype implies, but rather has complete mastery over them, which is pretty impressive no matter what your gender is. Anyway,
Huh.
we'll get back to the second. And then finally, if you ever decide to play another JRPG, I'd suggest having a go at Chrono Trigger. Aside from the fact that it is very good, it's also unusually short for the genre, with a first playthrough lasting between 15 and 25 hours depending on how many side quests you tackle. So it's not quite as massive a time commitment as other games in the genre. Most importantly, though, there were multiple points during your Final Fantasy IX playthrough that I found myself wondering what Tim would think of the game since it approaches many of the issues he brought up in some very interesting ways. Anyway, sorry for rambling. Keep up the good work. Oh, no rambling at all. That was fairly brief and succinct.
Hmm.
Um, I when he mentioned this Super Princess Peach game, I'm pretty sure I played that.
Yeah.
And I don't own it, so I must have borrowed it from someone. There were a couple that I borrowed, from other LucasArts people at the time, and I really feel like I played this one. And I remember her having abilities that had to do with her emotions and things like that. So I do feel like I played that one. Um, so she is the hero of at least one game. They really lean into her femininity, so the character is definitely not any different. Although she is empowered and is the main character, so that is a little side direction for Princess Peach. It is, however, on the GBA, and I doubt as nearly as many have played it as have played other entries in the Mario
There
series.
were a lot of games on that system.
There were,
Yeah.
and this would have been fairly late in the system as well. I remember playing Wario 4 as well at the same time. So
Mm-hmm. I did play that, I think.
yeah, I think I borrowed your copy. So
Yeah, Chrono Trigger it has come up. I think we've talked about that one, and multiple people at my work have when I've mentioned the podcast and playing Final Fantasy IX and stuff. They're like, I have found a number of people who are just completely obsessed with that game as far as JRPGs go and play it multiple times, have played it multiple times, sometimes annually. So it's on my list. Even just not even. I mean, yeah, we should definitely play it for the podcast if you want to, but even just for my own, just for playing it for fun, I might do it someday.
well, I purchased it for the Wii, number one,
Oh, okay.
because the Wii has that weird points thing where you buy things in increments of points. You can't just pay for
Oh, that's right.
a game. You have
So
to
you have
buy 1,000
extra.
points and then pay 800 for
Yeah.
something, and now I have 200 left over. I finally paid that down. I finally am at zero. I
Oh,
finally
wow.
found a perfect balance, but I had to buy like two extra games to do it. So, uh,
They
so I
got
bought
you.
this. I bought Super Mario World, but I also bought Chrono Trigger. I have Final Fantasy 6/3 or whatever, and something else I picked up recently to get myself back to zero. I planned it out. It's like, well, I'm going to buy Super Mario World, and I have this much left. What do I have to? What number do I have to buy to be able to do this? So I'm
Who
back to
got?
zero balance. It only took me 10 years. So
Yeah, you got
thank
them.
you. Oh man, boy, did
They,
I ever show them.
you showed them that
Ooh,
their system's not gonna wait a
they're
second.
not gonna get me to spend too much money. All right.
Uh,
Anyway, so you have I think the final email for the evening.
yes. So The subject is never played Majestic, but have you heard of In Memoriam?
Yes, I
From
wanted you to read this one. I thought it'd be up your alley.
MYM. I don't know what company that is. MYM1ND. That's some
I think it's
uh,
my mind. It's lead speak
my
for my
mind.
mind.
Yeah, okay. I see it
It's not
now.
a company. It's just my mind.
Yep, got
That's
it.
the emailer.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was the company in
Mm,
memoriam from my mind.
no.
But my mind slash, I guess his real name is Carl. Okay. Hi guys, loving the podcast. Lovely to have these reviews of long gone classics. I've just been listening to Super Mario World Part One. The underassociated games made me think of Blade Runner, Eternal Darkness, and the old Discworld games. But when you mentioned Majestic, I got reminiscing about a similar game called In Memoriam. Am I saying that right? In Memoriam? Yeah.
In memoriam, it looks like. Yes.
I too still have the emails. It is such a shame that these games are no longer playable. In fact, I can't think of many ARG games around now. And I've almost given up waiting on the iOS game Antioch Scarlet Bay. Keep up the good work, Carl from London, England. I have not heard from In Memoriam. So my ARG aficionado is Reed, who we've had on the podcast.
Yep.
Now they did come out with, I believe, I don't know if it's fair to call it Majestic Light, and I think it's called The Black Watchman, and it is a separate game, but a companion game to the Secret World MMO, which both Reed and I play. And but it's an ARG, like, kind of more traditional than obviously the MMO. And so I haven't dove into that yet. Reed tends to find them. I think he has mentioned In Memoriam to me, but I haven't taken the plunge with it.
I've just looked it up. It was sort of I do remember this. This is right around the time it came out in June of 2004 in the U.S., so it was right at the time where we were busy finishing Republic Commando.
Oh, okay, it's pretty old then, yeah.
It is older, and I definitely remember this being a thing where you would get emails from other characters in the world,
This must
as
have been a
well as
competitor to Majestic or right after or
and I
something
mean,
in response to.
I think it was more um, it's more I don't know, a riff on the same thing, not really a competitor, just trying to find a different way to make adventure games appeal because they were dead then.
Hmm.
Adventure games are dead. You've
Yeah, they
probably
died.
heard that.
They did. They
many
died.
many times. The zombie of the
They're still
game
sort of
genre.
dead.
But I think this is one way they were trying to
Hmm.
do something different with them, and you'd get these emails from it. It was Adventure Game of the Year from Computer Gaming World that year. So
Oh, okay. So yeah, Reed probably knows about it then. Antioch Scarlet Bay, I haven't
it's
heard of that.
their quote was "Missing since January," which was the U.S. title. Isn't just Majestic done right; it's Majestic done. Ooh,
Oh,
snap!
wow. Yeah,
Burn,
okay. Yeah, I mean,
burn, EA.
but then not possible to play now is kind of
Exactly.
what Carl's saying. Yeah.
I would say it's as you are as able to play it as you are Majestic.
So yeah. Well, I mean, there's that macro topic that I'm sure we'll talk about more at some point. Is just that concept of, historically archiving games, right? Especially server-based games. MMOs come to mind as well. Of like, what
Absolutely.
happens when the game is no longer playable and available. I will never forget. I bet you know what I'm going to say. I will never forget. I think we were on Jedi Starfighter when we were in Andrew's office and we were there
Yes.
on the day that Meridian 59 was shutting down.
Yep.
And just the weird feeling because in that, I don't, UO was still around. No big MMO had shut down yet. That was the first one I remember seeing like the last day of, but since then, obviously, many of them have. And just this weird concept of a persistent, obviously we're a little bit off topic, but a game that has some persistence and server based, infrastructure. And then, what happens when you turn that off? And this virtual world just disappears. Yeah,
Yes,
it's weird.
it was pretty wild in particular watching Andrew jumping around because the people who were still playing at that point knew him very well as his in-game counterpart, which I think was Zaphod, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, he's
Um,
basically a god.
right. I mean, he had all server powers, and so did his brother. We're talking about Andrew Kermsey and Christopher Kermsey, who wrote the initial server and client implementations of Meridian 59 before they were bought by 3DO and finished it there. And right, it was at the end of Starfighter or Jedi Starfighter where that shut down. You can still play it, actually. Andrew's open
It's
sourced
back
it,
up and
and
running, yeah.
yes, you
Since
can run
then,
it.
yeah.
People have their own servers, but at the time, it was really, really interesting. And I also remember, speaking of that, Reed talking about the shutting down of Star Wars Galaxies and
Yeah.
him going and making on the last night it was open, trying to get to the Jedi Temple,
Yeah.
wherever that was, and
Yeah. And the Matrix
getting there
is
and
another
watching
famous.
it. Matrix is another one,
Yeah.
yeah.
The Giant Bomb has that funny series about that. Yeah, it's just weird. And then with Majestic and In Memoriam specifically, not even being persistent games, but man, I just like, I guess, being a theater guy, I can appreciate the concept of the fleeting experience, the fleeting entertainment experience, because theater is based all on that, right? And the
Sure.
memories you have
Well,
of a great performance, you're
sure.
you're going to experience that, and no one else ever will, other than the audience with you. And maybe Majestic kind of falls into that for me, but I do still have those emails and those aim transcripts where I could go and relive a little bit of it, and tell the stories, which yeah, when you were visiting, my wife added to the story, which I
Oh
forgot
yes,
about until just
right,
now.
right. So she
Yeah,
this was
you
quite a
should
night.
tell
So
it.
there was, well, you're gonna have to help me because part of it was that there was like an escaped convict or something in Marin.
So yeah, I forgot about this because she added the flavor to it, as I mentioned in one of the previous podcasts that Carl was mentioning with Majestic. I had made the mistake of working late, and in Majestic, what you do is you would trigger kind of the okay for the game to move to the next step, which in sometimes would be sending you an email, sometimes it would be you go play the video or play a mini game, and
Artifacts.
sometimes it's a fax, or sometimes it's calling you on the phone. And you're like, okay, I'm moving to step 6. You can call me. Of course, I did that. I don't know, maybe from home the previous day, or I don't know when I did it. Maybe it was even from work. I was working late, crunching on Republic Commando. Little did I know, my wife, Jennifer, she had just moved from grad school back to the Bay Area, and so she was in a new apartment that we had just gotten into. So she was unfamiliar with it and the area, and this was in Sausalito, I think, at the time, and apparently there was some crazy guy on the loose in the
Right.
area who had used our cul-de-sac as a place to hide from the police.
Right. He was under a house
The
in
neighbors,
front of yours, a neighbor's house.
the neighbors, deck.
Right. Right.
So she was
Right. So
on.
a lot of houses in Marin don't have basements. They're just they
Yeah,
have decks and
just-
there's no wall to prevent somebody getting under the house. So this is not
Right,
the only place this
right,
happens.
right,
But in
right.
Marin, there aren't a lot of basements just because it's so close to the water, and the water table is high enough that you don't want a basement. And so there are homes that have slabs that are lifted up by something. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not an architect. But yeah, he was basically under the house.
Apparently hiding.
next
So
door.
she was there in the apartment, and like sirens are going by, and they're like running down the street, and they either caught him or chased him off or whatever. But then and this is the part I forgot. Then she gets the call I talked about before. Where they're like, "We know where you live," or whatever. I don't remember what it said, and she. She's in an unfamiliar place. There's some crazy person running around that, had been caught, but she didn't know that. And then this phone call happens. Yeah, I was in trouble.
Yep.
After that.
That's good. Now I understand that sort of indentation in the couch cushions
Yeah,
that I would see. Yeah, you probably slept there for a while.
exactly.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Now we're going to switch to a few reviews. I have one here that's a little bit longer. It's called A Free Course in Ludology from Industry Experts by
Whoa.
Kane if that's my real name.
He preempted you on that one.
Me.
Good job,
by
Kane.
Kane, if that's my real name, if that is your real name. This is,
No.
oh geez, where should I start? This podcast is an insightful look at games of the past in a way that is rarely viewed. Tim and Brett bring the years of experience they have in the game development industry to shine as they explain the interesting caveats of these games, while sharing their amusing relationship and gameplay styles with each other along the way. I like to think of this podcast as not just amusing, insightful, or a reason to play old games, but also a free lesson on game development and history. The style of this podcast is also very unique. The hosts are incredibly open about the format, sometimes even having meetings while recording, brainstorming whether changes make sense to the show itself. It should be highly applauded. Their interest in making sure their viewers are engaged. For my 10 plus years of listening to different podcasts, this is a very unique trait. If you have interest in game development or how games work, please do yourself a favor and listen to this podcast. Thank you, Kane. Yes, wow. We do occasionally just go into, well, maybe we should talk about this or that. Or that, I would say, is more just a lack of preparation, Kane, but I appreciate that it's a strength.
Yeah. And I mean, it's very, very humbling, and I'm gracious that you're calling it a course, in ludology. That's very nice of you to say. I think we strive for that, but I think I think we're just saying what's on our mind. I would love for us to be more structured with it, with our kind of the academic side of it, but we're having fun. This isn't our day job, so I think for us too, we just want to kind of keep it casual. So
yeah, it gives
glad
us
you're getting some from it.
Play things we haven't played, or that both of us haven't played, and or things that we actually have and just think are worth playing again and talking about. For me, it's been really fun to look back on games that we have played and talk about how they influenced us. Certainly there have been, like, talking about Half-Life 1, right? Obviously a thing that we both played and that influenced us strongly, and then to learn that some of the choices that we really thought were core choices that they made were just kind of accidents of development. And we love that stuff. So yeah, it's been fun for us as well. I gave you like a handful of very short ones.
I'll rattle through them.
Just to rattle through them.
The Best Thing Since Sliced Bread by MJ Waz. Informative, intriguing, and addictive. Enough said.
I think he's talking about sliced bread at that point.
Yeah, it is addictive.
It is
intriguing. Yeah, maybe. Next one, insightful and enjoying. By Addict Arts. Congrats on making it over 75 reviews in the store. I enjoy the show, and as a game developer, it helps as encouragement. Awesome. Great.
We don't hear from a lot of developers.
No, it's nice to always hear that developers are listening too. Hopefully, share ideas. Give us some feedback on that. We're definitely not perfect. And then last one, great show by Doc Brutals. Hey guys, I tried to write a review a week back, but I guess it didn't upload. When you guys were playing Soul Reaver, it brought me right back to my younger years when I played that on my Dreamcast. Check out Thief 2 Metal Age for a future show. It's one of my favorite games of all time. Keep up the great work, and thanks. Thief 1 is one of my favorite games of all time. I actually didn't finish Thief 2. Yeah.
Oh, for shame. No, they're both good games, and both have interesting things. One of the things I love about Thief 2 is I remember there's a mission where you have to eavesdrop.
Oh my God, for Thief 1.
Oh, I thought that was Thief 2.
Well, there's one in Thief 1 where you're following them down the alleyway?
This is where there's a conversation in a building and you have to stay near it, but there are guards coming by every so often, and so you have to kind of find a place to hide, but you can't get too far away. It's really a precursor to things like Assassin's Creed, where you have to follow people through the city and listen to what they're saying and things like that.
I think it's a game changer, that series.
Certainly the first two.
I'd love to. Yeah, we definitely should. And the thing I was thinking about, and Thief was the one that came to mind on this. Even though we did play System Shock 2 already, we haven't played an official Looking Glass game yet.
That's true.
Technically, System Shock 2 was kind of adjacent, right? But it's
Right.
sort of irrational / Looking Glass, and Ken was not necessarily working for Looking Glass, really, sort of. But but like Thief, and a handful of others, right? Were
I mean, for me, Ultima Underworld is like one of the ones we need to play.
Underworld, yeah. That was
That's Origin.
Origin. That was Origin, yeah.
It was Origin, and I think Looking Glass helped.
Yeah, it was I think it was in the transition when Looking Glass was being formed or something, right at that point.
Right, I think that's right. Yeah.
But yeah, Looking Glass is a super influential game on more than you know. For anyone who hasn't played a lot of their games, I think that all of us, and then Deus Ex at some point. We got to get there.
Oh God!
Try to get Warren Spector on. Yeah.
We could have made a whole podcast that was just sort of that particular lineage of games.
Yeah. Oh, and I started playing Dishonored finally. So
good.
I'm having fun with that. Yeah.
Oh, excellent.
Speaking of the devil, I mean, those.
I'm about to go back to Dishonored 2 actually in the very near future. So yeah, maybe we could bonus cast that at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to take the final one here because we're getting on an hour. This is from Raf, some artist guy, if that is his real name. Fantastic insight into classic-contemporary game development. I was told by a friend about this podcast and had a few reservations at first about whether I would enjoy a gaming podcast. I quit video games in high school due to a deep obsession with Diablo 2 and have kept my distance since as a way to regulate what I see as an addictive behavior. Beginning with the episodes on Final Fantasy IX, my all-time favorite gaming experience, I've listened to most of the episodes and delight not only in the nostalgia when they activate my own memories, but also in the clear and critical analysis. I work in book and exhibition design / curation, and I enjoy hearing such professional and high-level insight into the user experience. These aspects of games play out in any kind of offering for public consumption, be it literature or theater or movies as referenced in the podcast, or my own passion career in fine art and comics. Rock on, fellas. You're a delight and a soundtrack to drawing 8+ hours a day. Thank you, Raph. Also, I hope you're taking care of your hands. That's a long time to draw. I can barely type 8 hours a day, and I've been doing it for years. I love the identification of how the user experience ties in all these things. Literature, theater, movies, etc., or fine art and comics. It's a big part of how we experience anything. Certainly, for me, literature. I'm a big fan of the change to the codex, I have to say. I'm not a big fan of papyrus scrolls. I'm not old enough to remember papyrus scrolls. I'm just kidding. But I do. I mean, that presentation is a lot, and how you actually experience a piece of art is a big thing. We were just talking about theater kind of obliquely as these things that you only experience over a short time period. That's part of the experience, is that you can only see Sleep No More in the decade that it's going to be on in New York, and then it's going to be gone forever. And then any individual, you can only see the Tim Longo directed, what's it called? True West?
True West, yeah.
Only over that one weekend in Half Moon Bay.
It was 4 weekends, thank you very much, but yes.
I only saw it over the one weekend. For me, there was only one weekend I could be there.
Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, well, and not only that, but the show you saw was the only version of that show, even though, even though it was on more than one. That's just the beauty of theater, like every show. Seeing every show I direct, I watch every single show. A lot of directors, once they're done directing, they just don't watch the run. But I watch every show, and you see that it's different every time. It's a cliche, but that's something I love about it. And something I love about games, right? You play that game, and good games, they'll have some differences every time you play. So
every time one person plays, but certainly between. I mean, part of the grist for the mill of this podcast
between
is that
players.
Different between us.
Yeah, it's been fun. I think Final Fantasy will probably be a good memory continue to be a good memory for me because it was a game that you loved and I had never played. So I feel like it was a sweet spot for us of, you know what I mean, of seeing the big dichotomy between that, that experience. and you
Yeah.
could kind of coach me through, but then also I could, so I think, yeah, that was fun.
We
And
need to we need to
speaking of
find one.
Diablo,
I was gonna say we need to find one that you've played to death that I have never played, and I don't
so
know what that would be.
what's your experience with Metal Gear again? I forget.
I have played one, two, three, and half of four.
Oh,
So
okay, okay.
I've played a bunch of Metal Gear.
Yeah, so that
I
one.
would, but I would love playing Metal Gear because it's a game that back when people were really enjoying it, I totally bounced off of it. Um,
Hmm.
my career up until that point, so that would have been basically when I joined LucasArts, was PC games, games that were more role playing games and systemic games, and not a lot of boss battles in particular. I can remember playing it in the office, or maybe I was playing it at home and just was talking to somebody in the office and saying, "Man, I hope this game isn't all boss battles. I just can't stand boss battles." and Darren Stinnett just laughing and going, this might not be the game for you." And of course, I've changed my tune about that. But at the time, it was pretty rare for me to play a game like that where it was some systemic stuff, but mostly get to the next big story beat, which was a boss thing.
Yeah.
And not being much of a console player at the time, of course, now I've completely flip flopped. I almost entirely play console games, but it was an interesting period for me. A big switch.
Yeah, we'll have to. I'll think about that. We'll have to think about something like that we can flip that model on. I guess Hitman was the one of the cracks at that.
That's true. Hitman 2 was kind of a big one. Although it was a PC game, it was definitely a game I had never played any Hitman games at that time. So.
Yeah, and I love those games, but Hitman 2 wasn't like, it's not like something I played multiple times, you know what I mean? I love the series, but that particular game, so we need to find that one that's why Metal Gear comes to mind, because I played those, that series a couple times all the way through. But yeah.
I do love your Shadow Moses.
Oh boy, yeah, don't get me started.
All right, well, that is about it for this evening. Next time, I guess we're going to finish Super Mario World.
Yes, we have
I think we're close to the end.
Island and Bowser's Land or something. I forget what it's called.
I forget what it's called.
Yeah, but yeah,
we're
two
basically
main areas left. Yeah,
more big areas. I may try to dig around and find some more stuff out of curiosity. We'll see if I have time. Now that Tacoma's shipped, it's a little bit easier. So
yeah, the other thing we haven't fooled with too much are the Switch, the Switch palaces and stuff. So I might go
that's
do
right.
that.
There's a red one and a green one that I haven't even found.
Yeah, and a blue one I think as well. Yeah,
the one that might be coming. Sure.
Yeah, the blue one I think is in. I think you're right.
Is in the forest of illusion.
You're warm.
I'm warmer.
Yeah, burning up.
All right. Well, in the meantime, you can find us at DevGameClub on Twitter. You can shoot us an email at devgameclub@gmail.com. And I am at Brett_Duville, leaving him as...
At Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
Thanks very much for listening. Our outro music, I often forget this, is by at giant_rat/ficus. Thank you for that.
So
Tim
cool.
actually prefers your version, despite my meticulous composing by plugging into an automatic generator of music. And so you can hear that as you listen to the next moment. Anyway, I guess that's it for us tonight. Good night.
Good night.